Well, this is certainly a atypical video for an Oxford student channel, since this last summer in Austria for me have been filled with a huge amount of My Hero Academia content, and I love it so much, I figured I might as well use my engineering skills and see what I can do to help some of the underdeveloped characters in the show. I am no story expert or a literature student, so by underdeveloped, I meant it in a technical sense. As a fellow engineer in the making myself, I cannot express how much I love the character of Hatsume and how much I relate to her desires despite not being nearly as capable as her. I believe even with quirks existing in that world, our intelligence is still our greatest weapon, though the focus on it will undoubtedly be less in the educational system than in the real world, since so many have dived into the careers of being heroes. So, in this video, I'm going to see what an engineer can do to help one of the fellow students in Class 1A out, using engineering and making them a viable pro hero in the field. And that student is my boy Mineta. When engineers are to attack any problem, especially those as relevant as this one, we need to do the initial assessment of the situation. After that, we'll break down the results we get into different parts and apply engineering solutions to them one by one. I'm only talking about his quirk and the way he uses it and how we can make it better. Arguably, I would say his mental game needs an upgrade even more so than his physical game, but for that, I cannot do. And if you really want to up your mental game, please go to today's sponsor. Wait, I don't have any. So, in terms of his ability, some of the pros are the sticky balls works great in water and multiple other surfaces that we see in the episodes, and most modern adhesives are usually great in one but not the other. So for the kind of glue I've used in my summer placement, I have to dry the plots completely before I can apply them. But as we can see from the USJ arc, Mineta's ball works great in water and also dusty situations in the provisional license exam arc. So the second pro that Mineta's balls have is that it has a high degree of tensile and shear strength. So we've seen many characters trying to pull the balls apart, but none have succeeded in breaking them. Now we interrupt the regular programming with a little bit of engineering. So to explain what tensile strength and shear strength are, it might be better to explain what tensile force and shear force are. So tensile force is basically forces pulling anything apart, and the opposite of that, as you can see, is the compressive force. And shear force is slightly different, as things happen typically at an angle and you're basically trying to rip two things apart by moving it in opposite directions. And another way to look at all this is to just take a tiny point on any material, and as you can see, the arrows pointing outwards are the tensile forces, and the arrows on the surface are the shear forces, because the shear force, they work along the surface of the square and then they're trying to rip it apart. But if we take this into the consideration, then we'll be able to realize that all the shear forces it's doing are just tensile force at an angle. So if we do some resolving and geometry, then we'll be able to find the principal stress, meaning the stresses that are purely tensile or compressive. And one thing to note is that compressive forces are just tensile forces in the other direction. So basically, we can represent everything as arrows pointing outwards or tensile force, but sometimes when it becomes compressive, then we just make that value negative. So in the case of Mineta's sticky balls, the same principle applies. When a character is seen trying to rip the balls apart, essentially it's just applying a tensile force along the center of mass. And now we can assume the properties of Mineta's balls as being isotropic. That means it has the same sort of material properties, or resilience in this case, along all directions, so it doesn't matter which way you're pulling it from, the balls are being equally strong. So realistically, in My Hero Academia's universe, even though we haven't seen anyone with the ability to truly pull the balls apart or crush them with sheer strength, we can say it's pretty strong. However, I would argue someone like Muscular or All Might will be able to crush the balls just because of their being. They are basically god-level characters, and we can't really expect Mineta to really be able to compete with those monsters. And the next two pros that I found about Mineta's sticky balls are just quite obvious, because the balls are usually applied between surfaces or between a guy, a person, and the surface. So the spherical shape will allow it to be applied to wherever, and that flexibility is going to be really useful. And the fourth one is just, we haven't seen anybody being able to dissolve the balls or produce some sort of substance to really counter the effect of the stickiness. So that is also something to note. Despite the need to really get close and apply the balls, he doesn't really have that ability. Standing at 108 centimeters tall, he doesn't have the range of the tailman or anything. So basically, if he wants to get close, he's just gonna get knocked off straight away. Now, obviously, he's just a teenager and still growing, but I don't think his ceiling very high. And the second part is just how bad his ultimate move is. As someone that's so squishy, rushing towards the opponent is just gonna be death. Anyone with a mobile experience is gonna know that. And the third thing is how his sticky balls basically does no damage, but primarily acts as a immobilization tool. And the last con is just a little bit of afterthought. It's kinda like how Hulk might be able to overcome the Thor's hammer problem by just ripping the ground underneath, or how Captain America and Iron Man suggested that if the elevator goes up with a hammer in it, elevator is not worthy, but it's just a way to get around the problem. So the current roles for Mineta within any hero agency is that he can be a solid support and a rescue hero. For collapsing structures and almost instantaneous adhesive like them balls can be truly useful. And since it can withstand great stress, it will complement what Sato the Taped Crusader cannot do. Mineta can also create a chance for instant immobilization of the villains. So to truly move Mineta beyond being a solid support or rescue hero, a few things will need to happen. We need to fix his cons and improve his pros. So it's actually quite easy to fix the range issues for Mineta, as quite a few other characters in the anime have overcome these issues as the story moves on. Kaminari have started by conducting electricity all around him in an isotropic fashion, meaning the electricity goes evenly in all directions with him at the center. But now he's able to shoot electricity linearly, both saving the amount of power he needs to generate and the amount of shit he gets from Jiro. I really like this pairing, and if I make a video about how to make Kaminari even more powerful, then I think I'll make a case from a technical standpoint why those two are so nice together. So now we see that someone can change from a close range fighter to a long range fighter, and now let's look at the next inspiration, and that boy is Bakugo. As Mineta and Bakugo both rely on generation of wet sticky substances from their body, there is a limit on how much they can generate at one time before their body's metabolism have to shut down that function, and that allows for homeostasis, meaning the body enters a steady state. Bakugo overcomes it by storing the sweat in the containers that shape like murder, so it will make sense for Mineta to have this kind of storing mechanism as well. However, even though using a sack will be able to carry the most amount of balls, I would advise against this as it impairs movement by swinging exactly out of phase with human motion. Kinda like your annoyingly light backpack when you try to run to catch a bus. Something along the lines of an ammunition belt is gonna be enough. However, due to the annoying nature of spheres, we need to pack it alternatively on each side of the thing. But exactly how do we do it? Let's do some tabletop calculations. So since the height of Mineta is given already, we just need to do some very crude measurements and then a little bit of Pythagoras. So then we get that the belt can be as long as 41 centimeters. For something that's gonna make Hatsume very happy and very proud, I've chosen for the belt to go from the left shoulder to the right hip, because if Mineta is right-handed, then that means he has quite a little room for him to throw, and the belt and the balls attached to the belt will not be a hindrance. And given how massive those balls actually are, I found it quite depressing that I can only fit 5 on each side before it gets too much. But if we allow the belt to go all the way around his body and have some sort of a sliding mechanism, so when he finishes the ones in the front, he'll be able to reach the ones at the back, he'll be able to have 10 balls on reserve. Now that he's finally looked as ridiculous as it gets, let's give him a weapon. What about a slingshot? Because why not? Now armed with such a powerful weapon, he will be able to counter anyone from range And what's also good about a slingshot is that it produces basically no sound, especially with the squishy balls and the speed the balls are traveling at. So he will be also quite good at stealth missions, being the first one to take the first shot and immobilize the enemy from a distance. So now, with plenty of ammunition and a launching mechanism, we can safely say now that Mineta will be able to keep annoying opponents out of reach by simply hitting them with a ball from a distance and making them sticky. With him being able to attack from range, he doesn't need to use Grape Rush as a do or die mechanism. He can use it as a surprise attack tactic or as a last resort to break out of a sticky situation. In all fairness, I don't think Mineta needs a lot of attack for his balls, as his style gears heavily towards the support type. But just by adding speed to the balls he's launching, he can do quite a bit of damage just by collisions alone. We know the physics doesn't work the same way in My Hero Academia, so maybe using a mechanical launcher for the balls, like a crossbow, will solve the problem. But his whiny ass will probably complain that it's too heavy. So for the last con, it is indeed true that really strong foes can just get around the problem of getting stuck by ripping off the ground the balls are attached to and continue on. The only good way is to avoid this issue rather than overcome it. He just needs to aim better. By aiming at the joint of those people, given how much those seem to have super strength and resilience, binding their arms to their forearm would definitely hinder their movements quite a bit. And the only thing those opponents can do is ripping off their skins. And that's going to be extremely painful and make their subsequent actions difficult. Getting a ball in the opponent's hand, and given that they do not have any reality shaping quirk like Shigaraki or Overhaul's, then they will essentially not be able to use their hands. So yeah, this is it. These are just the simplest ways to strengthen Mineta and make him viable in the MHA meta. His role is a solid range to melee support, with balls getting to places that will cause the most hindrance, and the ability to make opponents immobile before the fight even begins. He is still squishy AF, so he needs to work in a team. Or, just give him a gun.
Remember this shit at Christmas!